Hi everyone, I'm Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting. Have you ever finished a quilt and realized you forgot to add a label? Or maybe you've agonized over how to make a label for your beautiful quilt that's professional, heartfelt, but relatively easy to make? Quilt labels are a wonderful way to sign your work. You can add a special message, or you can even record important details about your quilt's history. So today I'm going to show you 5 easy ways to make a beautiful, professional looking quilt label, whether you preferred handwritten, printed, pre-made, purchased, embroidered, or even iron-on designs. So let's get started. When I create a label for my quilt, I usually prefer to use a white fabric of some sort, 100% cotton, and I attach it to the back of my quilt. It's totally up to you what you prefer. There are a lot of ways. We're not going to cover how we attach it to the quilt, but rather we're going to talk about why we need a label and what we do to create that particular label. There are some fun ways that you can create your label, and I'm going to show you 5. First of all, before we even get started, you'll need, as I said, a fabric that you're going to make your label on. This is my favorite, just a plain white cotton. I also like to back my fabric with a Pellon interfacing, a fusible interfacing. I do that for 2 reasons. First of all, it gives me a little bit of backing to my fabric, just in case my fabric is a little thin. I don't want my backing fabric from my quilt to show through, and if you've got a darker backing fabric, it will. So when I put this fusible interfacing on the back of my fabric and then I create my label, I find that the label doesn't compete with the backing fabric. So that's the first thing. The second reason I do that is because when you write with your fabric markers on your label, the fabric can shift and move a little bit, your pen can drag if you're not careful, and the interfacing keeps that from happening. That's my choice. I like to use the interfacing. If your cotton label fabric is fairly thick, not really opaque, you can always skip the step of adding the interfacing and just iron a piece of freezer paper to the back of the label fabric, write on it, and then remove it. It will also keep it in place or stabilize it. Totally up to you. But I like the way that the fusible interfacing does that. I use the Pellon Shape Flex. It's also used for t-shirt quilts, and it's fusible on one side. Method number 1. Handwritten fabric labels. I like to fuse the interfacing to the wrong side of my label fabric. That stabilizes it, makes my fabric less transparent. If your fabric is fairly opaque, you can use it as is. Just take a piece of freezer paper, fuse it to the back to give you a little stability when you're writing on it, then remove the freezer paper. I also like to use a lined piece of paper underneath the fabric to make sure that my writing is straight. It's so easy to go crooked when you are trying to write and you don't have those lines marked. So what I like to do is I just created this on my computer. I created it so that the lines were spaced as I wanted it to be. It's up to you if you want it closer together, farther apart. This will go underneath my fabric. So I placed my fabric on the lined paper and I took my repositional glue stick. I actually put a little bit on the back just to keep this in place. This will be removed. And then I will make sure that I have it lined up so that I can write on the label. What I like to do is, I like to use the micron pens. Those are my favorite. The micron pens, they come in 0.01, 0.05. It's totally up to you. They come in a variety of colors. They are a really good marker when it comes to staying on your fabric even through washings. They write nicely and they last a while. So what I would do is write directly on my pre-washed light fabric. Use my freezer paper or whatever underneath it if need be. And then once I am finished writing my label, I'm going to heat set that ink with an iron. That's going to prevent fading. You really want to test and make sure that everything is good to go before you create your finished label. Check your markers. Make sure they're not going to bleed on your fabric. Make sure that they're as thin as you want them to be. Now I have several fabric markers I'm going to show you that I have. So I'm going to just show you the difference in the way that they write. This is the micron pen, and I'm just going to write my name. There you have that. That's the 05. Now I'm going to take, and I'm going to just use a blue. This is the 01. and you can see it's thinner, okay? Now, these particular fabric markers, it's just another one, an art marker. It has a bit of a thicker tip. It has two tips, actually. One's a thinner and one's a thicker. One's more brush and one's more, they call bullet. So let's take a look. This one is the brush. Got to be careful if you use that one, because that one definitely, as you can see, is much thicker. Test it ahead of time. This one is the bullet, and although it feels easier to write, it still is quite thick. So again, if that's what you want, this is the marker that you want. Now, I also have these markers that I bought at Missouri Star Quilt Company, these fabric markers, and testing these out, we'll just take a green one. This has got, again, the bullet point, and they write nicely. They do. They're just a little bit thicker. So if you don't mind it being thicker, these work well, and I have tried these on other projects and they hold up well. Now, tulip markers are everywhere. You see tulip markers all over the place. Let's take this color, the purple. Again, we've got the two tips, we've got the bullet, we've got the brush. This is very thick. There's no way, unless I was just filling something in, that I would use this to write with. Now here's the bullet, and this one is nice. That one gives us a nice color also. And if I slow down when I was writing, you can see that it gives a nice even marking on your fabric. So those are just a few examples. You'll want to test them ahead of time. You want to make sure that they are for fabric, because if you use something that's not specifically for fabric, let's say we want to try this Sharpie marker, watch what happens. It starts to bleed. You can see that it's bleeding. It's coming off, and when you wash that, it's going to get even worse. If you stop for a second, you've got a lot of that bleeding going on. Although Sharpies are permanent, not necessarily a good idea. You can see, look at how it's bleeding here. Not necessarily a good idea for a fabric label. Now, when I did this one, I wrote several things on my label. This is what's important. Now, this again is just handwritten, and I am not an artist, and my handwriting isn't all that hot. But if you look, I put the name of the quilt. I put my name, since I made it. I put the reason I made it. Maybe it's for a birth, maybe it's for a wedding, maybe it's for comfort. This was for our scrap busting challenge in 2025. You want to make sure that you have the date on there, and then wherever you live or wherever the quilt was created, it's important that that's on there as well, just to identify it. Now, I took my markers and I made a little flower on here just to give it a little bit of color. Then what I'll do is I will fold this and I will place it on my quilt. I'll fold the edges down, iron it, and then I'll either whip stitch it or somehow put it on my quilt down in the corner. But this will give you an idea of method 1, handwriting. Method 2, printable fabric for your quilt labels. Now, this fabric is actually called photo fabric. You can use it for anything you want when it comes to printing on fabric. It's been treated, and that allows the ink to really stabilize in the fabric and not fade. Now, you can also do it yourself. There are do-it-yourself products out there that will allow you to treat your fabric and then print on your fabric from your printer. I'm just going to use this one. This one is on a roll, so it has all the instructions in there. You just follow the instructions. I cut off a piece the size of my 8.5 by 11 inch paper. The first thing I do is I design my label on my computer. So I've designed these. You can do whatever you want. Pick the fonts. Some can be more personal. Some can be just a generic one to put on your quilt when you're finished, and you can write on it in addition to having these things printed on there. I just have several here. I printed it out. Once I designed it, they fit, so then I was ready to print it on fabric. So I did. So I'll show you this one. This is ready to go. Look at that. Isn't that great? Now you can see that you can sort of see through my fabric here, so I probably would put some stabilizer behind it, some interfacing of some sort, just to make sure that that didn't show through. So that's where I would use that Pellon fusible interfacing. But you can see that I have enough. You want to make sure you've got enough around the edge that can be turned under, or possibly if you're going to sew an envelope of some sort, you want to make sure that your design is preserved here. And it is. So I've got enough room here that I can cut this out depending on what I do. So how do you do that? Again, you have to follow the instructions on the photo fabric. So I'll just show you. It comes like this. It comes wrapped up in a paper, and then inside, tucked in here, are all the instructions on what you need to do to make sure that you've printed everything the way it should be. What you'll do then, open this up, and again, it's 8.5 this way, so I'll cut an 11-inch piece. This is my paper. I don't have to fuse it to anything. It is a little bit rolled, so I want to just kind of even it out a little bit, make sure that I flatten it out. But this is ready to be printed on. I will put it in my printer. It tells you in the instructions, depending on your printer, how to do that. And this is what I got. Now I'll show you one. Here's another one that I did. And I've created all these labels. I've just made some generic, knowing what was coming up so that I would have labels. This is on the paper. I have not yet peeled off the backing. This fabric on this side, 100% cotton, has backing that's stuck to it. We have to remove that. You can see the difference. This one has the backing removed. This one, the backing is still there. So you want to make sure that you follow the instructions that are written on your particular product. They have instructions on, how to rinse them, how to heat set them, how long you have to wait before you can do any of that process so that the ink dries. Now, it's important to note, a laser printer will not work for this. You have to have an inkjet printer. A laser printer, the ink will just come right off. If you have an inkjet printer, the ink will stay on your label. And again, like I showed you, look at how great that looks. This is it. This one has already been printed. It's ready for me now to remove the paper and to do the process of heat setting and taking care of that ink. So you want to make sure that you do that, but look at it. Isn't it beautiful? It just takes your printer, and I think it's really worth it. So this, for me, is my favorite way to create a label. Before we talk about our method number 3, I just want to remind you that it's time to sign up for our live workshop on March 22nd, 2025. If you're watching after March 22nd, 2025, the event is over, but you can still get access to it. So I'd love to invite you to join me on March 22nd for a live quilting workshop that you won't want to miss. We're going to have 2 live Zoom sessions, one at 1 p.m. and one at 7 p.m. Central Time. The workshop is called Adhesives in Action, Faster, Easier Foundation Piecing with a little bit of simple applique. We're going to be exploring foundation piecing with a fun and fabulous quilt pattern right behind me called Whirligiggle. I'm going to walk you through the construction process step by step. I'll show you a variety of techniques to use fusibles to make your blocks more accurate and your quilting experience smoother. In just 1 hour, and maybe a little bit more, you're going to discover simple tricks and tools that are going to revolutionize your foundation piecing. Whether you're a beginner or you're looking to refine your skills, I've got the answers for you. We'll also talk a little about how fusibles can be used in the applique process. And I'll show you how to make this Seminole border that's on the sides of my quilt. So if you can't make it live, not a problem. Your registration includes access to the replay so you can watch it anytime. Save your spot now. Go to joyfulandmerryquilting.com/freezer, F-R-E-E-Z-E-R. Remember, it's case sensitive, all small letters. That's where you'll register for this fun and informative workshop. It's all about quilting with confidence, and I am here to help you do just that. So I hope you'll join me. Method number 3, embroidered labels. You can do hand embroidery, or you can use a machine embroidery module to stitch a label onto your fabric. Now, these designs that I'm showing you right here are by Juju.com, Juju.com. She has so many wonderful designs, not just for quilt labels, but for anything you need to do to embroider on your fabric. So go ahead and take a look at Designs by Juju. If you have an embroidery machine, I know you're going to love all the things she has to offer, and that is going to give you a gorgeous label for your quilt. Method number 4, pre-made labels. I love my pre-made labels. Now, the ones that I have here, I bought from everemblem.com, everemblem.com. If you're looking for quilt labels, just go to her site and click on Shop Labels by Use and then on Quilts. And all sorts of great labels will come up that you can customize to whatever you want. Now, the cotton labels sell for $12 for 15. That's about 80 cents each. The satin labels, which is what I have, are $12 for 16, about 75 cents each. If you join their newsletter, you get 10% off. I don't have any affiliation with this company at all. I just love their labels. I think they're beautiful. One thing that I want to tell you, if you order the satin labels, what I do with this one is, I'm actually going to take my label and I fold it in half. I have Joyful and Merrily Handmade with Love by Mary Bologna, Joyful and Merry Quilting. So then I'll fold it in half and I'm going to sew this into the binding. So that way the label is sewn into the binding and you can see all the information. Now, a mistake that I made was I used my fabric marker and I wrote the year on this and it bled. The satin labels do not allow you to do that. You can always write the year somewhere on your quilt just so that it's there, or you can purchase the cotton labels and the cotton labels will allow you to do that. So here's the packaging. Satin labels is what I got, and they're just really, really beautiful, easy to use, and a great product. Method number 5, iron-on images. So this is a book, 101 Plus Delightful Iron-on Quilt Labels. The link is in the description. It's filled with all sorts of possibilities here when it comes to labeling your quilt. Now, of course, they're in black and white, and they are the mirror image. So what you'll do is you cut out what you want out of the book, which I cut this one out. And you want to make sure you give yourself a little extra around the edge so you don't cut the design off. And this is going to be ironed onto your fabric. Now, when I did this, these don't last forever. You can probably, I would guess, get 4 or 5 good, clean images out of it. I'm going to show you what I got. Here's the first one. Of course, you're going to place it ink side down, and then you will press it. Hold it as it says on the instructions, lift it up, and the ink has been transferred. You want to make sure that your fabric is all pre-washed and ready to go. Then what you can do is you can take your fabric markers and you can color in what you want on here. So it's kind of like a coloring book, which is really nice. Now, this was my first one. You don't want to push your iron around because the paper will move and you'll have a blur. I don't know why this didn't print really well here. I had my iron set the same way. This was the first time I used this particular piece, but I can always fill that in with a marker. Now, that was the first one. The second one you can see, little bit lighter. It's a little different. And then the third one, it's getting even more light. But you can still use this until you don't have any more ink left on the page, and then just color it in with your fabric markers. So you can get a lot of use out of all the labels. And again, there's 101 labels in here. So this is a really great way to make a label if you're not like me. I'm not really artistic. And that way I can put some really cute designs on my quilt label. Now, the instructions here have everything you need to know. You just want to make sure you read how to transfer, the different extra touches that you can do. And then on the back, it just shows you how to write, attach the label, etc. So there's a lot of information in this book. I think it's really worth it. It is a great way to do what we're supposed to do with the labels, and just a little bit more attractive than just handwriting on the label if you have the space to add this. So I really like this product. Whether you love handwritten, printed, or embroidered quilt labels, these methods ensure your quilt is signed with love. So which one's your favorite? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and click on the subscribe bell for more quilting tips. I'm always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. Thank you so much for watching.